AI is already replacing jobs. We need to be concerned with the fact that AI is technically just about impossible to regulate. We need to at least consider AI's potential for problem-solving destruction. GPT-5 will replace up to 49% of US jobs. It's nearly half of all US jobs. All right, guys, if you aren't yet impressed by all of the AI tools that have been released in the last 6 months or so, if you aren't a little bit shocked like I am, word on the street is we ain't seen nothing yet. In fact, GPT-5 is set to launch the end of 2023, December 2023, and it is supposed to be the greatest step forward, the greatest upgrade since GPT first launched. And a lot of tech leaders are starting to get worried. People like Elon Musk are worried about the launch of GPT-5. Steve Wozniak worried about the launch of GPT-5. Former presidential candidate Andrew Yang worried about GPT-5. Even the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, is worried about the release of GPT-5. In fact, over 1,000 tech leaders signed a letter in March of 2023 calling for a pause in the development of AI for anything more advanced than GPT-4. Now we have to ask ourselves, if one of the co-founders of OpenAI, Elon Musk, is worried about GPT-5, and current CEO Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who's going to release GPT-5, supposedly the end of this year, is worried, we have to ask ourselves, do we really know something they don't? I'm going to talk about what GPT-5 is, what all the hype is about, and what sets it apart from GPT-4. And then I want to talk about some potential dark outcomes that can follow the release of GPT-5. And I'm not going to talk about the typical theory of AI is going to take over the world and kill all the humans. I'm going to talk about some things that might be even a little bit darker. They're a little bit darker because they're a little bit more probable. To really understand GPT-5, we need to create a baseline from where we are right now. The last 6 months have been kind of a blur. Most of us are still trying to make sense of what GPT even is and what it does. I want to give you a perspective, my perspective, that might be a little bit different. Wrong or right, it's probably a little bit different than what you've gotten so far. We in this agency, we are not AI developers, we are AI users. We have a development team. We've created an integration with OpenAI's API. We're using GPT 3.5, which is turbo, GPT-4, depending on our data needs, how fast we need that data, the cost of that data. We're using one of those two to automate processes in this company. My perspective, again, for wrong or right, you can take it for what it's worth, is that GPT up through GPT-4 does have some serious limitations. I don't want to discuss all those. Some of them are kind of obvious. It's trained on the internet up through 2021. So if you need current information, you have to kind of bypass it. But on the other side of that coin, for all its limitations, I've personally been a little bit shell-shocked ever since we started using GPT. The reason I've been shell-shocked is because of what we're getting out of it and how quickly we're getting what we're getting. Let me give you a quick example. We have a team in India, and what takes them months to do might take our developers, just depending on the project, 2 or 3 weeks, develop and turn into software. So that's generally what we do. We take manual processes, we figure them out, and then we turn them into programs. That's kind of been the cycle for decades now for any company that has developers. What we've been able to do with GPT is we can take that development cycle of maybe 2 or 3 weeks and we turn it into hours. And where we had to develop the logic and we had to be right and we had to develop algorithms, we don't have to do that anymore. In fact, no one's doing it. We're delivering the right prompts to GPT, and it's learning from what the data it's been trained on and giving us a response. Now, consider the fact that we are in the very, very, very earliest stages of AI access. That kind of leads me to question, how long are people like you and I needed in this process? If AI, we're just learning to talk to AI and it can already do what it's doing. Again, take that for what it's worth. That is my perspective. But regardless, here's what we can expect from GPT-5 that we didn't have with GPT-4. Number one, it's going to have much deeper language comprehension. You can look at that in terms of nuance of language and syntax and technical language and jargon. Number two, GPT-5 is going to have greater reasoning ability. It's going to be able to take complex problems, analyze them, and come up with intelligent solutions. Number three, it's going to have more sophisticated creative algorithms. In other words, it's going to have a deeper understanding of things like poetry and art and music and cinematography. Number four, it's going to be capable of multimodal understanding. That's a little bit more similar to the way that we learn and understand as humans. In other words, it's going to be able to take, let's say, text, written text, and auditory data and visual data and maybe even sensory data and analyze and understand, but it's going to be able to do that potentially simultaneously, the way that humans do. Number five, it's going to be capable of autonomously generative media. Autonomously generated media means it's going to be able to write music from scratch. It's going to be able to develop maybe movies or video games from scratch. So you can look at that as not necessarily Sony doesn't need as many people, but technically speaking, a user doesn't need Sony. You're going to be able to write prompts and get GPT to customize those things, video games, movies, music, whatever, for you as a user. Number six, it's going to have a more advanced front end or UI. So it's going to enable non-technical people to have a little bit more access and functionality so that they can get from GPT closer to what a prompt engineer or a developer could get from it. Number seven, probably most significant, is it's going to have greater accuracy in making predictions. So predictions like medical outcomes or the outcomes of political races or economic projections. It's going to be able to take complex situations that humans have a hard time predicting the outcome of, and it's going to be able to make accurate predictions. How is this possible? How can it make more accurate predictions? Well, number 1 through 6. So if these improvements aren't yet shocking to you, I want you to keep a couple of things in mind. First, I want you to answer the question, who taught GPT how to speak Mandarin? Who taught GPT how to speak German? Or Hungarian? Or Persian? Or Arabic? The answer is no one. It essentially went to the well, it analyzed data, and it learned it on its own. And it learned them all at the same time. So while it takes a human an awful lot of time, years, to master one of those languages, potentially, GPT learned them all by accident simultaneously. And that was all before GPT-5. I want to give you another idea. Way back in 1997, IBM developed a program that could play chess. It was called Deep Blue. Deep Blue played the chess world champion Gary Kasparov, and it beat him. In fact, in a tournament, it beat him all but one time, I believe. I think there were a couple of draws in there as well. Now, if you imagine that a chess grandmaster can think maybe 15 moves ahead, maybe a couple of them could think 20 moves ahead, potentially. Deep Blue could think a little bit past that. All right, it edged out the chess world champion. When we're looking at AI, the functionality isn't just linear. It's not just that it can think 20 moves ahead or 25 moves ahead. It's probably more like 100 moves ahead at least, but 100 moves ahead in every direction simultaneously. It doesn't have the typical limitations that we see with other forms of intelligence. And if that's hard for you to get your head wrapped around, we're starting to see the limitations or the gap between human intelligence and what's possible with artificial intelligence. Now, here are the top 5 reasons we need to at least be concerned about the rise of AI. Number 1, AI is already replacing jobs. Consider OpenAI's letter that we just referenced that warned that GPT-5 will replace up to 49% of US jobs. That's nearly half of all US jobs. Every time I talk to somebody or debate them about whether or not AI will take specific jobs, I get some kind of argument like, oh yeah, well, AI will never replace plumbers. My reply, my guy, you ain't a plumber. And even if you were, the problem goes far beyond whether or not AI will take your job specifically. Let's see how this plays out. If I'm in a zip code and there are 100,000 people in the workforce and AI replaces much of one industry, and let's just say it replaces or takes over the jobs of 5,000 people in that 100,000 person zip code. What happens to those 5,000 people? Well, they're unemployed. Maybe you're in the 95% that haven't been replaced. But those 5,000 people now pour into the rest of the workforce. They're now competing in your space. And consider some of the jobs that have been replaced: data entry, data analysis, image design. Right now, those jobs are being done by some pretty smart people that are about to pour into your industry, assuming you're not one of the people that are replaced. Now, what happens when the supply of anything goes up? Value goes down. Basic economics. The supply goes up in the workforce, the value goes down. Your pay goes down. Number 2, second reason we should be worried about the rise of AI. AI means the consolidation of power for big tech. How so? Well, regardless of who's developing AI, big tech seems to be swallowing it up. We just watched Microsoft invest millions of dollars into ChatGPT, and then they promptly connected GPT to Bing Chat. We watched Google invest $300 million into the company, the AI startup Anthropic. We're watching Amazon, Nvidia, Apple in a virtual space race to get to the forefront of the AI frontier. Now, how does that make big tech more powerful? Well, we just talked about the fact that AI is taking over entire industries. It's replacing jobs. And it's doing that for the low cost of data, really. And so if big tech owns AI and AI takes control of industries, well, you do the math. Number 3, we need to be concerned with the fact that AI is technically just about impossible to regulate. Why? Well, first, AI is not a US commodity only. So let's just assume that we pass some meaningful regulation in the United States. That does nothing to stop development in China or other countries like that. And we have to consider whether or not it makes sense to stop development here in the US when we can't necessarily stop it in countries like China. Second, AI is moving way too fast. Think about some of the almost regulation that has never been able to pass. There's regulation or potential regulation that's been debated for decades, and we've never gotten it passed. So now if you look at how fast AI is moving and how fast it's moved in just its baby stages in the first 6 months of mass access to AI, we have to ask the question, can we really keep up with AI development with any kind of meaningful regulation? And then the last reason that it's pretty impossible to regulate AI is that it's kind of ubiquitous at this point. Let me give you an example of how fast AI is spreading and how difficult it is to control. There's already been one tech startup that used ChatGPT to design a competitor to ChatGPT. That's how fast it spreads, and that's how little technical ability we need to replicate AI at this point. Number 4, we need to at least be wary of the fact that AI hastens the ability of some people to deceive or beguile. Think about the fact that the word deepfake has been sweeping across the internet. It is one of the most searched terms on Google right now. What does deepfake mean? It means to digitally replicate somebody's face or body or voice or something else to defraud someone else. AI makes that more possible than it's ever been in the past. Number 5, we need to at least consider AI's potential for problem-solving destruction, or to problem-solve destruction. What do I mean by that? Well, think about how much effort and energy and resources are poured into warfighting right now in all of its different applications. And you can look at warfighting as high-end kinetic operations, or you can look at it as economic warfare, or you can view it through the lens of systems disruption or getting involved in political processes. But whatever the mechanism for fighting war, AI will only hasten it. And you'd have to ask yourself, can we really think that companies like DARPA or BAE or Northrop Grumman are not going to leverage AI to enhance their ability to make machines of warfare? So those are the top 5 reasons, or at least in the short term, the top 5 things we need to be worried about in regard to AI. Is GPT-5 itself going to be evil? No, of course not. Is AI evil? No. Technology is never evil in and of itself. But it is nearing the point where it is really not going to be trained by developers much longer. Why? Because it is starting to get to the point where it's trained by itself. It is self-learning. That's the reason that Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, left Google to warn the world about the potential downfalls and dangers of AI. The question is, do you and I know more than he does? All right, guys, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment. If you disagree, agree, other reasons you're concerned about AI, let me know. Maybe we'll do a video on it. All right, guys, till next time.